Welcome. It is so great to have you with us today.
Yeah, we are thrilled you're here.
Whether you are commuting, making your morning coffee, or just taking a well-deserved break, I want you to take a second and think about something before we really get going.
Right.
When you woke up this morning, you probably went through your standard routine. You brushed your teeth, maybe washed your face, looked in the mirror, and got dressed.
Usual stuff.
Exactly the usual stuff. But according to the fascinating psychological transcript we are exploring today, you also did something else. You put on a mask.
We all do.
Yeah, we all do. We wear these hidden psychological masks every single day. We adopt specific personas, specific ways of interacting with the world, and most of the time, we do not even realize we are doing it.
Not at all. It is completely subconscious.
Right. These masks were forged a long, long time ago, back in our childhoods, and they were designed with one very specific purpose:
Keep us safe.
to keep us safe. But the core theme of today's deep dive is that while these masks might have saved us when we were kids, as adults, they might be the exact things holding us back from actually living a full, authentic life.
It is a profound paradox,
It
really.
really is.
The material we are analyzing today is an incredibly detailed, entirely anonymous transcript of a deep psychological discussion. It strips away all the background noise.
All the anecdotes about who said what to whom.
Exactly. And it focuses purely on the raw mechanics of subconscious programming, early childhood trauma, and the brilliant, yet sometimes really destructive survival strategies we adopt.
We are going straight into the deep end of human behavior today.
We are. And to be clear, we are looking at this purely through an analytical, psychological lens. We are exploring the profound insights contained within the text itself to understand the architecture of our own minds.
So our mission for this deep dive is to guide you through this complex material, breaking down the 12 distinct survival masks outlined in the transcript.
12 very different strategies.
Yeah, 12. We want to figure out why we wear them, what they look like in our day-to-day lives, and how we might finally start to take them off.
It is going to require some empathy
A lot of self-reflection.
and maybe a few uncomfortable moments of recognition.
Definitely. But before we get into the specific masks, I was incredibly struck by the foundation the material lays out regarding the subconscious mind. We usually assume our brains just want us to be happy.
We do, but the material suggests something entirely different. What's fascinating here is the absolute clarity with which the material defines the prime directive of the human brain.
It doesn't care about happiness.
The subconscious mind does not care about your happiness at all. It does not care about your self-actualization, your career goals, or your inner peace.
Wow.
It cares strictly and exclusively about your survival. That is its overriding evolutionary mandate.
Just keeping you breathing.
Exactly. The analysis points out that between the ages of 0 and 6, human brains are essentially sponges. During this period, children operate in highly receptive brainwave states.
Predominantly theta and alpha waves.
Predominantly theta and alpha waves, yes. This means they're absorbing their environment without the critical filtering capacity that adults have. They are completely, terrifyingly dependent on their caregivers for food, shelter, and emotional regulation.
So because they have no physical power to fight or flee, their only mechanism for survival is adaptation.
Adaptation is everything.
If a child in that hyper-receptive state experiences what they perceive as a threat, their brain immediately goes to work.
Precisely. The subconscious immediately kicks into gear and calculates, okay, this environment is currently dangerous. What specific behavioral adjustment can I make to ensure I survive this?
And in that split second, a strategy is formed.
That strategy, that adaptation, becomes the mask. And the crucial point to understand is that these perceived threats do not necessarily have to be massive cinematic traumas.
They don't have to be explosions or obvious abuse.
No, they can be subtle, systemic issues. It could be a parent's chronically harsh tone.
Or a lingering lack of emotional availability.
Or just the unspoken, tense dynamics between the parents themselves. The child's mind reads the room, interprets these environmental cues, decides what is safe and what is dangerous, and hardwires a behavioral response.
And the tragedy is, we then carry this hardwired response into our adult lives.
We do.
We keep reacting to a 30-year-old threat that is no longer even in the room. We are basically wearing heavy winter coats in the middle of summer because it snowed when we were 5.
That is an excellent way to conceptualize it. The armor becomes a cage, we forget that we put the coat on, and we just assume the world is inherently heavy and restrictive.
Okay, let's unpack this. The material outlines 12 specific typologies, 12 masks. And the first two deal with the most fundamental struggle of all, which is the struggle for existence and identity.
The very baseline of being human.
Let's look at mass number one, which is described as the chronically depressed. These are people who subconsciously reject their own existence. Reading through this section, it wasn't just describing someone having a bad month or grieving a loss. It described a persistent, foundational feeling that the world is unlivable, that they do not belong here, and that being terminally unlucky is simply their destiny.
It is a profound heaviness.
Where does a feeling that deep even come from?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the analysis provides a rather profound and sobering origin point for this specific mask. It suggests that this deep-seated rejection of existence often stems from trauma experienced at the very beginning of life,
Okay.
sometimes even in the womb or during the birthing process itself.
In the womb, so before the child even has language or conscious thought, the subconscious is already taking notes.
Absolutely. The developing fetal nervous system is exquisitely sensitive to the maternal environment. The material discusses scenarios like near-death experiences before birth, severe complications during delivery, or pregnancies that were heavily unwanted.
Or fraught with extreme maternal distress.
Yes. The argument is that the fetal nervous system absorbs this biochemical environment of distress, high cortisol, or rejection. Implicit memory forms long before explicit narrative memory.
So they don't have a story about it, they just have a feeling.
Exactly. The subconscious essentially records a somatic bodily message that says, the environment into which I am arriving is hostile. My presence is fundamentally not desired.
That is incredibly heavy, the idea that a feeling of not belonging could be hardwired before you even take your first breath.
It changes how you view chronic depression.
It really does. It explains why these individuals often feel like every door is closed to them, even when opportunities are objectively available. They do not actively try to harm anyone, they just retreat.
They make themselves incredibly small.
They assume that failure or rejection is a foregone conclusion. They're wearing a mask of perpetual withdrawal because they feel their core existence is a mistake.
Yes, and that leads us directly to the contrast of the second mask. If the first mask is about rejecting existence entirely, the second mask is about desperately bargaining for it.
The self-sacrificer.
This is the self-sacrificer. According to the analysis, these are people who only allow themselves to exist by serving others. Their subconscious rule, formulated in childhood, is that I'm only allowed to take up space on this planet if I am useful.
If I am carrying someone else's burden.
Exactly.
I see this one everywhere. These are the people who live on absolute automatic pilot. They are the ones who always put everyone else first. Their kids, their spouse, their siblings, their coworkers, even strangers.
And society loves them for it.
Right, on the surface, society applauds this. We call them generous, selfless saints. But the material points out a massive hidden imbalance that makes this incredibly unhealthy. Giving is the easiest thing in the world for the self-sacrificer, but
Receiving is practically impossible.
it is.
This raises an important question about the underlying nature of their generosity. The insight here is that for this mask, giving is not actually an act of pure, joyful altruism.
It's a transaction.
It is a desperate survival mechanism. They give to buy their right to exist. They give to secure attachment from the people around them and to aggressively ward off the threat of abandonment.
Because if they aren't useful, why would anyone keep them around?
Exactly. Therefore, when someone tries to give back to them, whether it is a physical gift, a compliment, or just offering to help them with a task, it causes intense, often baffling subconscious anxiety.
It freaks them out.
It actively disrupts their survival strategy. If they receive, they are no longer in the position of the ultimate provider. If they aren't providing, they lose their perceived value, which means their subconscious alarms start blaring that they are no longer safe.
Receiving feels like an existential threat.
It really does.
There was a specific detail in the text about how this loss of identity and this need to sacrifice oneself can begin, and it completely stopped me in my tracks. It discussed the deeply ingrained tradition of naming newborn children after deceased relatives.
That is one of the most profound psychological insights in the material. It argues that placing a deceased ancestor's name on a newborn, especially an ancestor who suffered, died tragically, died young, or even an ancestor who was considered a towering, idolized, perfect figure in the family.
It acts as a burden.
It acts as a massive energetic and psychological burden on that child.
It's meant to be a tribute, but the text frames it almost like a haunting. The child subconsciously feels they have to live that other person's life, like they have to be a physical continuation of the dead relative, which completely erases their right to be an original human being.
What's fascinating here is the mechanism of family projection. The subconscious mind of the child, operating in those highly receptive theta states we talked about, picks up on the family's unresolved grief,
Or their melancholy.
or their heavy reverence associated with that name. Every time the mother or father looks the child and says the name, there is a micro-expression of grief or remembrance for the deceased.
And the child's nervous system registers
It
this.
registers it every single time.
They learn they are looking at me, but they are seeing someone else.
Precisely. The child internalizes the message that I am not loved for being me. I am loved because I act as a placeholder for him or for her.
Wow.
So their entire life becomes an act of self-sacrifice. They sacrifice their true, spontaneous identity to maintain the illusion of the deceased person's presence to keep their parents happy. They become the ultimate self-sacrificer before they can even speak a full sentence.
That makes me want to pause and ask you, the listener, a question. Have you ever felt dutty just for taking up space? Or do you know someone, maybe it is you, who literally cannot accept a compliment or a birthday gift or an offer to help pay the dinner bill without feeling deeply uncomfortable or rushing to find a way to pay the person back immediately?
It is a very common feeling.
If receiving feels like a physical threat to your safety, you might be wearing the mask of the self-sacrificer.
It is a critical reflection, and it highlights how our survival mechanisms suppress our true nature. Moving through the analysis, we transition from the struggle for basic existence to the struggle for expression.
Right.
This brings us to the third and fourth masks, which deal with muffled voices and the terror of visibility.
Let's look at mask number 3, the emotion suppressors, or what the text calls the bottlers. These are people who simply cannot express what is inside them.
They hold everything in.
And what struck me is that it is not just about holding back anger or biting their tongue when they have been wronged. It is a blanket suppression. It's an inability to express joy, too.
The good and the bad get suppressed.
Yeah, they are the people who literally choke on the words, "I love you." They cannot advocate for themselves when they are treated unfairly, but they also cannot fully surrender to a moment of pure happiness. Everything is capped.
We connect this to the bigger picture. We have to look at how children learn about emotional regulation. Emotions are fundamentally physiological events.
They happen in the body.
They are energy in motion within the body. When a child experiences a strong emotion, whether that is crying out in pain, screaming in anger, or even laughing too loudly when they are excited, they express it fully. But if that expression consistently results in punishment, shaming, or the withdrawal of love from a caregiver, the child's survival algorithm updates.
The algorithm says expressing energy leads to danger. Therefore, I must swallow the energy.
I must keep it down.
But the material was incredibly specific about the fact that this energy does not just magically disappear into the ether.
What's fascinating here is the stark mind-body connection, the material details. It argues that chronically suppressing emotions and stifling your own natural voice and creativity physically manifests in the body, specifically in the throat area.
A physical throat.
Yes, the text explicitly links this psychological suppression to chronic throat infections, thyroid issues, and goiters. The literal physical mechanism of speech and expression in the body becomes diseased because it is constantly being clamped down by the subconscious mind.
It's like putting a cork in a pressure cooker. The pressure has to go somewhere, so it attacks the valve.
That is exactly what happens.
The idea that constantly holding back your natural talents because you are afraid of criticism actually damages your physical throat is wild, but it makes perfect intuitive sense.
It is a profound somatic blockage. If you are constantly swallowing your truth, the physical organ of expression pays the toll. And this ties very closely to mask number 4, which the analysis refers to as the invisible ones.
The invisible ones.
If the bottlers suppress their voice, the invisible ones suppress their entire physical presence.
The transcript used words like sinister and fated to describe this typology. It sounds harsh at first glance, but reading deeper, it is describing a tragic, manufactured reality.
It is a very sad adaptation.
These are people who actively, subconsciously try not to be seen. They speak in whispers or trailing sentences. They wear dull colors, browns, grays, muddy tones, things that blend into the background.
They want to fade out.
They hide in oversized, shapeless clothes. They want to be wallpaper. They want to be a ghost in their own lives.
And if we look at the root cause provided by the analysis, it is deeply empathetic to why a human being would choose to become wallpaper. The origin of the invisible mask is almost always a highly oppressive, incredibly strict, or highly unpredictable authority figure in early childhood.
A terrifying presence in the house.
Yes, this could be a tyrannical parent, a terrifying grandparent, or anyone with absolute power in the household who used fear, rage, or severe criticism as a control tactic.
So the child's subconscious does the terrible math of survival. It looks at this terrifying, volatile giant in the room and calculates the safest way to navigate the space. And the answer it comes up with is, if I am seen, I am a target.
Standing out is dangerous.
If I stand out, if I achieve something, if I make a noise, the giant's eye turns to me and I get yelled at, demeaned, or hit. Therefore, my absolute best chance of survival is to become completely invisible.
Exactly. The mask of invisibility is, purely and simply, camouflage. It is a highly effective, highly intelligent survival strategy for a small mammal trapped in a predatory environment.
It works when you're a kid.
It does. The tragedy, as the material points out, is what happens when the child grows up. They leave the childhood home, the tyrannical giant is gone, but they keep wearing the camouflage.
They carry the predatory environment with them in their mind. So what does this look like for an adult? It means they miss out on promotions at work because they refuse to take credit for their ideas.
They step back.
They miss out on romantic relationships because they cannot bear to be looked at or desired. They miss out on life because their brain is still fundamentally convinced that visibility equals death.
They are surviving, but they are completely absent from their own existence. This concept of being out of sync with your own life, of being frozen in a survival posture, brings us perfectly to the next major theme in the material.
The push and pull of maturation.
Yes, which involves masks 5 and 11. These deal with how childhood trauma fundamentally distorts our relationship with time, responsibility, and the concept of growing up.
This section of the transcript absolutely blew my mind. Mask number 5 is actually split into two opposite extreme reactions to childhood stress and family dysfunction. On one side of the coin, you have the rushed adults.
The children who grow up too fast.
These are the kids who were forced to become the Band-Aid of the family. The material describes them as children who had to act as parents to their own parents.
The clinical concept here is parentification. This dynamic occurs when the actual adults in the household are emotionally immature, severely negligent, struggling with addiction, or simply absent.
The adults drop the ball.
They do. The child looks around the home, sees chaos, unpaid bills, crying siblings, or emotionally volatile parents, and their survival instinct kicks in. The subconscious says the structural integrity of this family is collapsing.
Someone has to steer the ship.
Someone needs to be in charge here, and since nobody else is doing it, it has to be me.
So an 8-year-old takes on the emotional and logistical weight of a 40-year-old. They make the dinners, they break up the fights between their parents, they soothe their mother's anxiety.
They become the caretaker.
They completely abandon the playfulness and safety of their own childhood to keep the family system from sinking.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they grow up to be adults who cannot relax, who feel responsible for everyone in their office, and who view play or leisure as deeply irresponsible.
They literally don't know how to play.
No, because play was never safe. But then you have the complete inverse reaction, the other side of Mask 5, the eternal children.
The eternal children, these are the people who subconsciously refuse to step into adulthood. And there is an incredibly specific, memorable anecdote in the material that illustrated this perfectly.
The lawyer.
Yes, it described a highly successful 45-year-old lawyer. By all outward metrics, she is a titan. She is sharp in her career, she looks incredibly young, almost like a teenager. But behind the scenes of her personal life,
It's a completely different story.
her father still manages her credit cards. Her father controls her finances, dictates her investments, and handles her personal affairs. She has completely surrendered the adult responsibilities of her autonomy back to her parent.
This raises an important question. Why would a highly capable, highly educated professional choose to remain a dependent child in her personal life?
Yeah.
What is the psychological payoff?
Right, what does she get out of it?
The analysis explains the deep subconscious terror driving the eternal child. Often, these individuals grew up in households where they witnessed the adults around them suffering immensely.
The text gave the example of domestic abuse, right?
Yes. Imagine a child growing up in a house with severe domestic violence between the parents. However, the child themselves is never physically harmed. They are spared because they are perceived as just a little kid.
They're too small to hit.
The child watches the adults scream, bleed, and suffer, and their subconscious draws a brilliant, terrible, and completely logical conclusion.
The subconscious says being big means getting hurt. The adult realm is a war zone where people get beaten, crushed by debt, and destroyed by responsibilities. The only reason I am safe right now, the only reason I am not being hit, is because I'm small.
So I have to stay small.
Therefore, to stay safe, I must stay small forever.
Precisely. The mask of the eternal child is a desperate, lifelong attempt to freeze time. They might achieve professional success because society demands it, but energetically, emotionally, and logistically, they remain tethered and dependent.
They won't cross that threshold into real adulthood.
They categorically refuse to claim their own authority because stepping into authority feels like walking into a trap. And this dynamic is deeply, intrinsically connected to mask number 11, the dependent.
The dependent. This is where the mask becomes almost like an energetic umbilical cord that was never cut and in some cases becomes a matter of life and death.
It gets very severe.
The material describes people whose entire existence, their literal life force, is tied to sustaining a parent. The specific detail included here was chilling. It talked about a medical student.
Yes, this case study perfectly encapsulates the extreme end of this mask. The student was dedicating her entire life to studying medicine, but the underlying motivation was not a passion for the biological sciences.
Nor was it a grand altruistic desire to heal the world.
No. She was enduring the grueling trials of medical school solely to keep her bedridden mother alive. It was a hyper-focused, desperate mission.
She felt completely responsible for her mother's survival.
The material details a moment of intervention where this student was asked a hypothetical question. She was asked what would happen if she finally broke her energetic psychological dependency on her mother, if she were to pack her bags, step into her own independent life, and focus purely on herself.
And her immediate, terrifying, instinctual answer was, she would die.
She would die.
The student didn't mean she would be sad or disappointed. She genuinely, fundamentally believed that her mother's continued biological existence relied entirely on her own self-sacrifice and proximity.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we see the ultimate crushing burden of the dependent mask. The child's identity is entirely subsumed. They believe they are the literal life support system for the parent.
They aren't allowed to exist for themselves.
They're not allowed to have their own dreams, their own romantic partners, or their own geographical freedom. They only have the solemn duty to sustain the parent. They choose their career, their location, and whether or not they get married, entirely based on the parent's perceived needs.
It is a devastating trap. It completely reverses the natural flow of life. A child is meant to launch from the parent, to take the energy given to them and push it forward into the future.
That is the natural progression.
But the dependent remains permanently anchored as a caretaker, pouring all their energy backward into the past.
It is an inversion of the natural order, driven by a deeply implanted sense of guilt and misplaced responsibility. And what all of these masks so far have in common, from the invisible one hiding in the corner to the dependent acting as life support, is a deeply distorted relationship with power, agency, and control.
It all comes down to control.
Which is exactly what the psychological transcript dives into next. Let's look at the spectrum of control and power, covering masks 6 and 12.
Mask number 6 presents another fascinating dichotomy, another split reaction to feeling powerless as a child. The material divides this into two opposing camps. First, you have the fatalists.
The ones who give up.
These are individuals who have completely rejected their own agency. They have embraced learned helplessness. They blame the economy, their parents, the government, the alignment of the stars, or just vague bad luck for every single thing wrong in their lives.
Nothing is their fault.
They absolutely refuse to take any proactive action to improve their situation because they have fundamentally surrendered.
What's fascinating here is the secondary gain of this mask. Why choose to be a victim? Because it provides a very specific type of safety.
How is that safe?
If you say, the deck was stacked against me from the start, the game is rigged, then you never have to try. And if you never try, you can never be blamed for failing.
Ah, I see.
It is a mask of absolute victimhood that protects the ego from the terrifying vulnerability of attempting something difficult and falling short.
It's the ultimate preemptive strike against disappointment. But then, swinging to the complete opposite extreme of Mask 6, you have the Dictators.
The Dictators use power aggressively and oppressively. The analysis describes these individuals as highly narcissistic, overbearing, and obsessed with micromanaging everyone around them.
They want to control the whole room.
But the profound psychological insight here is that this dictatorial, dominant behavior is not born from true strength or genuine confidence. It is actually a mask for deep, hidden, agonizing feelings of powerlessness.
It's extreme overcompensation. They feel so profoundly out of control internally, so terrified of the chaotic nature of life, that they try to put a rigid chokehold on their external environment.
They have to control everything outside.
If they can control exactly what their spouse wears, what their employees think, and how their children behave down to the minute, they can temporarily quiet the terror inside themselves. They confuse controlling others with being safe.
Precisely. They create a tiny, heavily policed kingdom where they are the absolute ruler simply because they are terrified of the wildness of the world outside the wall.
Which is exhausting for everyone around them.
And this desperate need to manage the environment leads us to what is perhaps one of the most common, exhausting, and physically painful masks described in the entire transcript.
Yeah.
Mask number 12, the control freak.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because the control freak doesn't just want to micromanage people, they want to micromanage reality itself.
Time, outcomes, probability.
The material says they view life as a literal minefield. Every decision, every interaction, every slight change in plans is a potential bomb waiting to go off. Their brain is a supercomputer constantly running disaster simulations.
To truly understand the agony of the control freak, we have to look at the root trauma. The analysis explicitly links this mask, not necessarily to prolonged systemic abuse, but to sudden, unpredictable, world-shattering childhood trauma.
Something that just drops out of the sky.
It is often a sudden shock to the nervous system that seemingly comes out of nowhere. A near-drowning incident on a sunny Tuesday. A severe, unexpected illness that puts a sibling in the hospital. Or, very commonly, the sudden and unexplained loss of a beloved family pet.
The child is just going about their innocent life, and suddenly, boom, the floor drops out. And the child's brain realizes, wait a minute, things can just end without any warning.
The illusion of safety is shattered.
The world isn't safe at all. It is completely chaotic and malicious.
Yes. The subconscious records that sudden intrusion of chaos and makes a vow. It decides, I was caught off guard once and it was agonizing. I must never ever let my guard down again.
I have to see everything coming.
If I control every single variable, if I anticipate every possible disaster before it happens, I can prevent the bad thing from ever reaching me or the people I love.
It's magical thinking. If I worry enough, the plane won't crash. And the text notes that this relentless 247 vigilance manifests violently in the physical body.
The physical toll is massive.
Control freaks often suffer from severe chronic neck pain, upper back tension, migraines, and even hernias. They are physically bracing for an impact that never comes. They are quite literally trying to carry the weight of the world on their shoulders.
The muscular tension is a direct reflection of the psychological rigidity. But the material provides another incredibly fascinating example of how a deeply ingrained control complex can be formed.
Oh, the first feeding part.
Yes, and it is something so utterly common, so seemingly mundane, that most people wouldn't even classify it as trauma. We need to talk about the concept of forced feeding.
This was the part of the transcript that made me reevaluate everything I thought I knew about parenting and childhood. Imagine a simple scene. A young child is sitting at the dinner table. They have eaten half their meal.
Right.
Their stomach expands. It sends a clear biological signal to their brain, and the child pushes the plate away and says, "I'm full." In that moment, the child is perfectly attuned to their own biological sensations. They know exactly what they need.
They are listening to their internal compass. But then the parent intervenes. The parent, perhaps operating out of their own anxieties about the child's weight, or simply wanting to enforce rigid rules about clearing the plate or not wanting to waste food, says, "No, you're not full.
Look at your plate.
You haven't finished. You need to eat 3 more bites." And they physically or emotionally pressure the child to consume the food.
It happens in millions of homes every night. But what's fascinating here is the subconscious programming that occurs in that specific, seemingly innocent interaction. When the parent forces the child to eat against their own clear bodily signals, the child's mind is forced to learn a devastating lesson.
The lesson is, my internal compass is wrong. My bodily sensations, which are screaming that I am full, are incorrect. I cannot trust my own body.
I cannot trust my own intuition.
The towering authority figure in the room knows my reality better than I do.
That is massive. The parent thinks they are just getting the kid to eat some peas, but they are actually shattering the child's internal compass. They are training the child to ignore their own intuition. in favor of external validation.
And it echoes for decades.
And the material discusses exactly how this seemingly minor event echoes into adulthood.
It creates adults who are fundamentally alienated from their own inner knowing. Because their self-trust was overridden when they were toddlers, they grow into adults who cannot make basic decisions without crowdsourcing opinions.
They are the people who can't decide what to order at a restaurant until they know what you're having. They can't decide if they should take a new job without asking 10 friends.
They need someone else to tell them what is real.
They can't decide if their romantic relationship is working because they don't know how to access their own feelings. They constantly seek an external authority, a partner, a boss, a guru, to tell them what they're feeling and what they should do.
It is the ultimate loss of self-trust. And when you don't trust yourself, when your internal landscape is a void, you either try to micromanage everything externally to compensate, becoming the control freak.
Or you become completely paralyzed, terrified of making the wrong move.
Which brings us to a group of masks that are entirely defined by how they attempt to manage the chaotic systems they find themselves in, particularly their families. Let's look at the exhausting family roles, masks 7, 8, and 9.
The transcript gets beautifully granular about how family systems assign these roles unconsciously and how we get trapped playing these characters for decades. Let's start with Mask 7, the good child versus the bad child.
The analysis presents a brilliant synthesis of these two archetypes. It notes that while the good child and the bad child look like absolute opposites on the surface, one is the pride of the family, the other is the black sheep, they're actually wearing two sides of the exact same mask.
They're driven by the exact same thing.
They're both driven by the exact same aching subconscious need, the desperate desire for love, attention, and visibility from their caregivers.
The good child tries to hack the system by being flawless. They look at the parents and think, if I get straight A's, if I never talk back, if I am the star athlete, the perfect musician, and the easiest kid to raise, they will have to love me.
They become an achievement machine.
They equate their human worth entirely with their output and their obedience. But the bad child, living in the same house, takes a completely different route.
The bad child looks at the family dynamic and performs a different calculation. They realize, I can't possibly compete with the good child's perfection. Or my parents are so distracted by their own dysfunction that they don't even notice me when I do well.
Being good gets me nothing.
So the subconscious shifts gears. If you are not going to look at me when I am good, I will absolutely force you to look at me when I am bad.
The bad child acts out, rebels, skips school, and breaks the rules because in the stark economy of childhood survival, negative attention is vastly superior to no attention at all. To a child's subconscious, being yelled at and punished is preferable to being invisible and forgotten.
At least they are engaging with you.
At least if they're yelling at you, they know you exist.
Both roles are incredibly exhausting performances. The good child lives in terror of making a single mistake and losing their worth, while the bad child lives in a state of constant defensive conflict. But then we move to mask number 8, which the material calls the servant.
We touched on this slightly with the self-sacrificer, but the servant mask has a distinctly darker, more deeply subservient edge to it.
It is much more self-effacing.
The text describes this as the person in your life who will literally clean your entire house, fix your car in the pouring rain, do all your heavy lifting, listen to your problems for hours, but will adamantly, almost aggressively refuse to let you even buy them a coffee in return.
This raises an important question. Why the extreme, impenetrable refusal of reciprocity? The expert analysis explains that the servant mask stems from a profound, deep-seated feeling of fundamental worthlessness.
They feel inherently flawed.
They do not just feel they need to be useful to be loved. They feel they are inherently irreparably flawed and a burden to the earth. For them, servitude is not generosity. It is an apology. It's an ongoing apology for their very existence.
They are paying off an existential debt that they believe they owe just for breathing. And the material points out the severe real-world danger of this mask. Because they project such a low sense of self-worth and because they actively refuse to establish boundaries or accept anything in return, they become highly susceptible to predatory people.
Exactly. They attract individuals who are more than happy to take advantage of free labor, endless emotional support, and unconditional subservience. The servant mask is a beacon for exploitation and abuse because the servant themselves believes they deserve nothing better.
It is a heartbreaking dynamic, and it contrasts with mask number 9, which is exhausting and dangerous in a completely physiological way. Mask 9 is the Peacemaker.
Ah, the Peacemaker. This is a very common adaptation in highly volatile households.
The text calls them the family agony aunt. They are the Joker who diffuses the tension at Thanksgiving. They are the person who rushes into every argument in the house, throwing themselves between fighting siblings or screaming parents, hands raised, saying, okay, okay, let's calm down.
I'll handle it.
I'll handle it. Let's look at both sides. Please, let's just not fight.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to look at what the Peacemaker is actually doing. The Peacemaker is essentially acting as a human lightning rod for the entire family system. They cannot tolerate conflict because, in their childhood environment, conflict meant severe danger.
Conflict meant the family might shatter.
Someone might leave. Someone might get hurt. So their survival strategy is to constantly, obsessively monitor the emotional temperature of the room. They become hypervigilant to micro-expressions of anger or resentment.
They intervene at the very first sign of heat. But to diffuse the anger between two other people, the peacemaker has to absorb it. They act as the emotional sponge, soaking up the resentment, the rage, and the chaotic, jagged energy of everyone else in the room.
And the material is brutally, terrifyingly clear about the physical toll this takes on the human body over time. You cannot constantly absorb the chaotic, highly charged energy of other people's conflicts without it breaking your own biological rhythm.
The text specifically links the Peacemaker mask to profound cardiovascular and nervous system issues. It mentions heart arrhythmias, severe panic attacks, and chronic paralyzing anxiety.
Their nervous system is fried.
Their physical heart literally loses its natural rhythm because they are constantly vibrating with the unexpressed stress and anger of the people around them.
It is one of the most profound illustrations in the text of how psychological burdens become undeniable physiological realities. The sympathetic nervous system of the Peacemaker is in a state of constant overdrive. They are so busy trying to keep everyone else's heart rate down, so busy managing the external chaos that their own heart begins to fail them. They completely lose their own center.
I want to take a moment and talk directly to you, the listener, right now. Think about your own friend group, your workplace, or your family dynamic. Are you the person who rushes to pay the bill at dinner every single time, feeling sick at the thought of someone else treating you?
Very common.
Are you the one everyone calls when they have a crisis, but you look at your phone and realize you have absolutely no one to call when you're the one falling apart? Or does the sound of two people arguing in the next room make your chest tight and your heart race?
If receiving feels like a weakness, or if other people's problems feel like your absolute responsibility, you might be wearing one of these exhausting family masks.
It might be time to take a breath, step back, and let someone else buy the coffee.
That boundary setting is a vital, necessary step toward unmasking. And recognizing those patterns prepares us for the final mask detailed in the material, mask number 10. This mask is perhaps the most encompassing and philosophically deep, as it deals with the very core of our identity, the severe imbalance of our core energies.
This section was deeply fascinating, and it requires us to think beyond traditional labels. The material talks about how childhood trauma causes people to subconsciously reject, suppress, or heavily armor their natural core energies.
Yes.
It uses the descriptive concepts of masculine and feminine energies, but it makes it very clear it's not talking about gender in a biological or traditional societal sense. It is talking about fundamental, universal energetic forces present within every human being.
Exactly. We need to define those terms as the text uses them. It defines masculine energy as the energy of doing, protecting, penetrating the world, boundary setting, and logical structure.
Taking action.
It defines feminine energy as the energy of being, receiving, intuiting, nurturing, and emotional fluidity. The material explains that a healthy, integrated, unmasked person has open access to both of these energies and uses them harmoniously depending on what the situation requires.
But trauma shatters that harmony. Trauma forces us to pick a side and heavily fortify it. The text provides two incredibly vivid examples of this severe imbalance. The first is what it calls the warrior woman.
The warrior woman.
Yeah.
The analysis describes her as an individual who has completely, systematically suppressed her receptive, softer, intuitive energy. Why? Because at some pivotal point in her childhood, being soft equated to being horribly vulnerable, and being vulnerable meant getting deeply hurt or taken advantage of.
So she decides vulnerability is a lethal flaw. She puts on layers of impenetrable emotional armor. She operates almost entirely in a hyperprotective, highly assertive masculine energy.
She is a fortress.
She handles everything. She needs absolutely no one. She dominates her environment, and she views receiving help or expressing need as a fatal weakness.
She is an absolute fortress. And on the exact flip side of the energetic spectrum, the material describes the princess man. This is an individual who has completely abandoned the energies of responsibility, decisive action, boundary setting, and forward momentum.
Because of their own childhood conditioning.
Due to their own specific childhood conditioning, perhaps having an overbearing mother or an absent father, they operate almost entirely in a passive, dependent, highly receptive energy, preferring to let others take charge, make decisions, and shield them from the harshness of the world.
Now, here is where it gets really interesting. The psychological transcript does not just describe these imbalanced individuals in isolation, it explains how they interact in the real world.
The relational dynamic.
It breaks down the subconscious psychology of romantic attraction based on these extreme energy imbalances. The core rule, according to the analysis, is that people are absolute magnets for their energetic opposites.
This is a crucial, undeniable concept in relational psychology. The subconscious mind is always seeking equilibrium, always trying to complete the puzzle, even if it does so in a highly dysfunctional, painful way.
It seeks balance, even if it hurts.
Therefore, a woman who is operating entirely in a hyper-independent, fiercely protective energy, the warrior woman, will inherently, almost magically, attract a partner who operates in a dependent, passive energy.
She will attract the princess man. She will attract someone who needs to be managed, protected, and directed, simply because her mask is entirely built around managing, protecting, and directing things.
Exactly. They fit together like a lock and a key. But the tragedy is she will eventually become deeply, bitterly frustrated that she has to manage everything and that her partner won't step up. Yet her own energetic armor prevents him from doing so.
The material gave a really great, starkly simple analogy for what happens when two people with the exact same imbalanced energy try to get together. It says, two roosters will just fight.
They will just fight.
If you have two people operating purely in hyper-competitive, fiercely protective, rigid energy, there is absolutely no space for emotional connection, vulnerability, or receiving. There is only an endless, exhausting battle for dominance and control.
What's fascinating here is the proposed solution the text offers for this dilemma. The analysis is absolutely adamant that you cannot fix this by trying to force your partner to change their energy to suit you.
You can't nag them into balance.
You cannot nag a passive partner into being assertive if you were taking up all the assertive space. If you want a balanced, integrated partner, you must first do the terrifying work of balancing your own internal energies.
It's an inside job. If the warrior woman learns to slowly dismantle her armor, to soften, to allow herself to be vulnerable, and to practice the terrifying act of receiving help, she completely changes her energetic frequency.
She fundamentally shifts.
And when she changes, she will no longer be an energetic match for a highly dependent, passive partner. The dynamic of the relationship will either organically shift to meet her new balance, or the relationship will naturally, inevitably dissolve to make way for a healthier, more integrated match.
It all comes back to the internal mirror. You cannot change the reflection in the mirror. You have to change what is standing in front of it. And that profound realization brings us to the synthesis of everything we have covered in this expansive deep dive today. We have walked through all 12 survival masks detailed in this incredible psychological transcript.
We have covered a vast, sometimes painful terrain. We looked at the deeply depressed who feel their very existence is a mistake, and the self-sacrificers who only allow themselves to live if they are serving others, carrying the heavy ghosts of dead relatives.
We examined the bottlers with their physical throat blockages, choking on their own truth.
And the invisible ones hiding in oversized clothes, desperately trying to survive the tyrant's gaze.
We discussed the rushed adults robbed of their childhoods, and the eternal children like the lawyer, frozen in time to avoid the pain of adulthood.
We looked at the fatalists who surrender to victimhood, the dictators who crush others to feel safe, and the control freaks whose shattered self-trust, born from things as simple as forced feeding, makes them carry the weight of the world to prevent a disaster that isn't coming.
We analyzed the exhausting performances of the good and bad children, the subservient who invite exploitation because they feel worthless, and the peacemakers whose hearts literally lose their rhythm absorbing the family's rage.
And finally, we looked at the deep imbalance of our core protective and receptive energies, and how our unhealed trauma dictates who we love and how we fight.
It is an immense amount of psychological material to process. But the most important takeaway, the brilliant through line connecting every single one of these 12 masks, is that they were all built for survival.
They kept us alive.
They were not character flaws. They were not moral failings. They were brilliant, highly creative, desperate strategies designed by a tiny child's developing brain to navigate a terrifying, unpredictable world.
That reframing changes everything. We don't need to be angry at our masks. We don't need to hate the part of us that needs to control the schedule or the part of us that hides from the spotlight. We need to thank those parts for keeping us alive when we were small.
They did their job.
But we also need to recognize, with radical honesty, that they are outdated. We are running 30-year-old, virus-laden survival software in our adult lives, and it is causing the whole system to crash. We don't need the armor anymore.
And that leads to the final, most deeply hopeful insight from the expert analysis. How do we take the mask off? The text emphasizes that finding the root cause, which is almost always buried deep in those highly receptive years before we turn 6, is the master key. The material introduces a concept beautifully analogous to the observer effect in quantum physics.
Right, the idea that the act of observing a particle changes its behavior.
Exactly. Applied to psychology, it suggests that simply by observing these subconscious patterns, by dragging the origin of the mask out of the dark basement of the subconscious and into the bright light of our conscious adult awareness, we fundamentally alter its power over us.
Once you know why you are physically terrified of receiving a birthday gift, or why you feel the agonizing need to control your partner's weekend schedule, the spell starts to break.
The pattern loses its grip.
You realize you are just reciting an outdated script. And once you can see the script in your hands, you finally have the power to put it down and rewrite it. You can actually rewire your reality.
The subconscious mind prioritized your survival above all else. It did its job. But your conscious, capable adult mind can now take the wheel and prioritize happiness, deep integration, and true authenticity. The masks we discussed today are not your true face. They never were. They're just the heavy armor you wore to survive the battle. And the most important thing to realize is that the battle is over.
So what does this all mean for you? As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over. Something to take with you into your day, something to think about long after you take your headphones off. Tomorrow morning, when you wake up, walk into the bathroom, brush your teeth, and get ready to face the world, I want you to take a long, unflinching look in the mirror.
Really, look at yourself.
Look past the physical reflection, look past the routine, and ask yourself a very hard question. Which of these 12 masks are you putting on before you walk out the front door? Is it the peacemaker, ready to absorb everyone's stress? The control freak, bracing for impact? The invisible one, hoping nobody looks your way? Acknowledge it. See the armor for what it is, and more importantly, who would you be if you just left it on the nightstand?
That is the ultimate beautiful question of self-discovery.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. It has been an intense, revealing, and incredible journey through the hidden corridors of the mind. Take care of yourselves, be incredibly gentle with your masks, and we will see you next time.